The emergency klaxon shrieked through the biodome control center, and I nearly dropped my thermal scanner into my Klaxy beverage. 17 cycles working xenobiology research on Earth, and nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I was witnessing on the surveillance feed. Coordinator Threx. My assistant Ven burst through the sliding doors, his gill slits flapping with panic. "We have a critical situation in Sector 7. I turned my eye stalks toward the holographic display, where 12 predators circled something small in the grassland enclosure. 12. My secondary heart stuttered. The creatures moved with lethal precision, their spotted coats rippling over muscle designed for one purpose: killing. "What is that thing they are stalking?" I demanded, zooming the camera feed closer. "According to the biosignature, it is a juvenile human." Ven's voice cracked. "Approximately 4 rotations old. A human child. How did a human child breach our containment protocols?" My tentacles coiled with stress. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. The council would have my head mounted on the Hall of Failures if a human offspring perished under my watch. But wait, there was something else in the frame. Something low to the ground, positioned directly between the child and the advancing hyenas. Something that made my scales prickle with primal unease. "Is that," I squinted at the screen, "a honey badger?" Ven checked his datapad, his face turning a fascinating shade of purple. "Affirmative, Coordinator. Species designation: Mellivora capensis. Specimen name: Brutus. Brought to the facility 6 cycles ago for behavioral study." 6 cycles? I sputtered. "We have had a honey badger in our research facility for 6 cycles, and nobody thought to inform me that we were housing one of Earth's most psychotic organisms." The hyenas had stopped their advance. Smart. Even they recognized the universal symbol for terrible life choices incoming when they saw it. The honey badger, this Brutus character, had planted himself in the grass like a organic landmine, his beady eyes fixed on the pack with what could only be described as enthusiastic malice. The human child, oblivious to the mortal danger surrounding him, was digging in the dirt with a stick. Digging. In the dirt. As if 12 apex predators and 1 berserker mammal were not engaging in a standoff roughly 3 body lengths away from his soft, vulnerable human body. "Should we deploy the security drones?" Ven asked, already reaching for the emergency protocol panel. No, wait. Something about this scenario tickled my research instincts. I had spent nearly 2 decades studying Earth species, and if there was one thing I had learned, one absolute universal truth, it was this: never, ever underestimate the sheer stubborn insanity of Earth organisms. The alpha hyena, a female with a scar across her muzzle, took a cautious step forward. She was calculating, measuring the threat. Hyenas were not stupid. Their bite force could crack bones. Their pack tactics had evolved over millions of years. They were efficient killing machines. The honey badger yawned, actually yawned. It opened its mouth wide enough to showcase teeth that had no business being that sharp in a creature that size, and then it made a sound. Oh, ancestors help me, it made a sound. A growling, rattling, chittering noise that translated in every language across the galaxy to, "I have zero regard for my own safety, and I am about to make that your problem." "Coordinator," Ven whispered. "The child is laughing." He was right. The human child had stopped his excavation project and was watching the scene with the pure, uncomplicated joy that only human juveniles seemed capable of producing. He pointed at Brutus and clapped his tiny hands together. "Badger, funny badger." The hyenas exchanged glances. You could see the confusion in their body language. This was not how prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey screamed. Prey did not sit in the grass giggling while a hyper-aggressive mustelid prepared for glorious combat. 2 hyenas attempted to flank wide, trying to circle around toward the child from different angles. Excellent tactics. Textbook predator strategy. Unfortunately for them, Brutus had not read the textbook, and if he had, he probably ate it out of spite. The honey badger charged, not toward the flanking hyenas. No, that would be too logical. He charged directly at the alpha female, the largest and most dangerous hyena in the pack. He charged with the energy of a creature that had long ago made peace with mortality and decided that if he was going down, he was taking everyone else with him. The alpha hyena, credit to her survival instincts, retreated. She actually backed up. A predator that outweighed the honey badger 3-1 took one look at that furry missile of fury and decided that discretion was, in fact, the better part of valor. But Brutus was not done. Oh no, he stopped mid-charge, pivoted with impressive agility, and rushed the two flanking hyenas instead. They scattered like leaves in a windstorm. One of them yelped, actually yelped, as Brutus snapped at her heels. "This is magnificent," I breathed, recording every second. "Do you see this, Ven? This is why humans conquered their planet." Coordinator, I fail to see how this relates to human dominance. The human child is literally doing nothing. Exactly. I spun to face him, my excitement building. The human child is doing nothing because he does not need to do anything. He has a honey badger. The pack was regrouping, their initial confidence shaken but not broken. 12 versus 1 were still favorable odds, even if the one was certifiably insane. The alpha began coordinating her pack with a series of vocalizations, preparing for a concentrated assault. That was when the human child stood up. He tottered forward on those ridiculous bipedal legs, stumbling over his own feet with the coordination of a drunken slinko worm. He walked straight toward the hyena pack, and my blood turned to ice water. "Deploy the drones now," I shouted. But before Ven could activate the emergency protocols, something happened that would later be reviewed by the Galactic Xenobiology Institute no less than 47 times. The human child walked past Brutus, reached into his small carrying pouch, and pulled out food. Food. He pulled out food. In the middle of a predator encounter. "Cookie," the child announced cheerfully, holding up a circular baked good. "Badger want cookie?" Brutus, who moments before had been ready to fight a dozen carnivores to the death, immediately sat down. He sat down and made a chittering sound that I can only describe as hopeful. The child broke the cookie in half and offered one piece to the honey badger, who took it with surprising gentleness. Then, and I want to be absolutely clear about what I witnessed, the human child turned to the nearest hyena and extended the other half of the cookie toward her. "Dog want cookie too?" The universe held its breath. I held my breath. Ven made a sound like a dying turbine. The hyena pack stared at the tiny human with expressions that cycled through confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been the animal equivalent of what is even happening right now. The alpha hyena took 3 steps forward. Brutus stopped eating his cookie portion and fixed her with a look that clearly communicated, "Try something, I dare you." But the hyena did not try anything. She stretched her neck forward, delicately took the cookie piece from the child's outstretched hand, and retreated to a safe distance to consume it. The other pack members watched this transaction with visible confusion. The human child giggled again. "Nice dog." "That is a hyena," I muttered to no one in particular. "That is a bone-crushing pack predator, not a dog." The child, naturally, did not care about biological classifications. He reached into his pouch and produced more cookies. More cookies. The small human had apparently entered a dangerous wildlife enclosure armed with nothing but baked goods and the unshakable confidence that everything would be fine. Over the next 15 minutes, I watched a 4-rotation-old human child conduct what could only be described as an impromptu feeding session with a pack of hyenas and one increasingly relaxed honey badger. He distributed cookies with the fairness of a seasoned diplomat, ensuring each hyena received equal portions. When one larger male tried to take more than his share, Brutus made a warning growl, and the hyena immediately backed down. "They are forming a truce," Ven whispered, his scientific curiosity overcoming his panic. "Overbaked wheat products. Document everything," I ordered, my mind racing through the implications. "The council will never believe this without complete visual records." One of the smaller hyenas, emboldened by cookies and the strange, peaceful energy radiating from the human child, approached closer. She sniffed the child's leg, then flopped down beside him in the grass. The child, delighted by this development, immediately began petting her head. "Soft dog, good dog." The hyena's tail wagged. It actually wagged. A wild hyena, from a pack known for taking down prey 5 times their size, was wagging her tail because a human child called her a good dog and gave her processed flour. Brutus finished his cookie and waddled over to the child, climbing directly into the small human's lap with the presumption of someone who knew their place in the social hierarchy was secure. The child wrapped his arms around the honey badger and squeezed. "Hug for Badger." Brutus tolerated this with remarkable patience. For a creature whose species' reputation was built on fearlessness and aggression, he seemed perfectly content to serve as a stuffed toy for a human juvenile. The alpha hyena watched this interaction, then made a decision that would baffle xenobiologists for years. She approached the child, lowered herself to the ground, and rested her massive head on the grass beside him. Within moments, 3 other hyenas had joined her, forming a protective circle around the small human and his unlikely guardian. Coordinator Threx, Ven said carefully. What exactly are we witnessing? The fundamental truth of Earth biology, I replied, unable to tear my eyes from the screen. Humans do not survive because they are the strongest or the fastest. They survive because they make friends with things that are. A chime interrupted my philosophical musings. The biodome's main entrance had activated. I switched camera feeds to see a human adult female running through the facility corridors at remarkable speed. She was approximately 30 rotations old, wearing the standard research uniform, and her facial expression conveyed what my translation matrix labeled as maximum parental panic. That must be Dr. Emma Larsson, Ven said, checking his files. Xenobotanist assigned to Sector 3. She filed a missing child report approximately 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes? Her child has been missing for 20 minutes, and she only now reported it? Apparently she thought he was in the education center. The education center thought he was with her. Communication error. Communication error. That was one way to describe the bureaucratic failure that had allowed a human child to wander into an enclosure containing apex predators. I was going to have strongly worded discussions with several department heads. Dr. Larsson burst into the observation deck, her chest heaving from exertion. Where is Jack? The security system said he triggered alarms in Sector 7. That is the predator enclosure. Why is my son in the predator enclosure? Dr. Larsson, I began carefully. Your offspring is currently safe. However, the situation is somewhat unusual. Show me. She pushed past me to the monitor, then froze. Her face cycled through several expressions in rapid succession. Relief, confusion, anger, resignation, and finally, weary acceptance. Is he feeding cookies to the hyenas again? Again? I sputtered. Again? This has happened before? Not with hyenas specifically. Dr. Larsson sighed deeply, the sound of a parent who had aged several years in the span of one conversation. Last month at the Earth Zoo, he somehow convinced a rhinoceros to let him scratch behind its ears. The month before that, he befriended a family of raccoons who started following him home. Jack has a gift. A gift, Dr. Larsson? Your child has weaponized adorableness to create interspecies alliances. That is not a gift. That is a tactical advantage. She gave me a look that suggested I was being overly dramatic. I was being perfectly reasonable, given the circumstances. How did he even get that honey badger to protect him? I gestured at the screen, where Brutus had repositioned himself to use the child as a backrest while surveying his new hyena allies. Oh, that is Brutus, Dr. Larsson said, as if that explained everything. Jack met him last week during the facility tour. They bonded over snacks. They bonded. I repeated the words slowly, testing them for hidden meaning. A 4-rotation human child bonded with a honey badger over snacks. Jack bonds with everyone over snacks. It is kind of his thing. Ven cleared his throat. Dr. Larsson, should we extract your offspring from the enclosure now? The situation appears stable, but it remains potentially hazardous. The human female considered this, watching her child laugh as a hyena licked his face with a tongue designed for tearing flesh. Give me 5 more minutes. He is having fun, and honestly, he is safer with Brutus than he would be with most babysitters. Safer with a honey badger, I muttered. She thinks her child is safer with a honey badger. Honey badgers do not judge, they do not get distracted by their phones, and they will fight anything that threatens their friends, Dr. Larsson said reasonably. That is more than I can say for most childcare providers. She had a point. I hated that she had a point. The next 5 minutes passed without incident, unless you counted one hyena discovering that the human child enjoyed being used as a jungle gym. Jack climbed onto the alpha hyena's back, grabbed handfuls of fur, and announced himself king of the dogs. The hyena, showing the patience of a saint, walked in a slow circle while the child cheered. Brutus supervised this activity with the intensity of a security professional, his gaze constantly scanning for threats. When one younger hyena got too enthusiastic with his play biting, Brutus issued a sharp bark that immediately corrected the behavior. The hyena lowered her head in submission, properly chastised. "Your creature has established pack hierarchy with 12 hyenas," I told Dr. Larsson. "A honey badger has established pack hierarchy with hyenas. Do you understand how that violates at least 4 principles of behavioral biology?" "Earth biology is different," she replied with a shrug. Different. That was the understatement of the millennium. Earth biology was not just different, it was absolutely bonkers. Finally, Dr. Larsson activated her communication device. "Jack, sweetie, it is time to come inside. We need to have a talk about wandering into predator enclosures." The child's face fell into an expression of pure human juvenile disappointment. "But Mama, I am playing with dogs and badger." "I see that, and we will discuss appropriate playmates later. Come along now." Jack gave each hyena a goodbye hug, which they accepted with surprising grace. He squeezed Brutus one more time, then tottered toward the enclosure exit that Dr. Larsson had opened remotely. Brutus followed him, naturally. The honey badger was not about to let his tiny friend wander off alone. The hyenas watched them leave, their expressions suggesting they were reconsidering their entire understanding of the food chain. The alpha made a low whining sound, almost plaintive. "Bye-bye, dogs. I come back soon." Jack waved enthusiastically as he disappeared through the exit portal. I collapsed into my chair, my exoskeleton aching from tension. That was the most stressful half hour of my career, but also the most scientifically valuable, Venn added. "Already organizing the recorded data. This footage will revolutionize our understanding of human integration capabilities." He was right, of course. What I had witnessed was not just a lucky accident. It was a demonstration of the fundamental human survival strategy. Make allies of everything, fear nothing, and always carry snacks. Dr. Larsson collected her child at the observation deck entrance. Jack was lecturing Brutus about the importance of sharing cookies, while the honey badger listened with the attention of a devoted student. The scene would have been adorable if not terrifying in its implications. "Dr. Larsson," I said carefully, "your species is banned from 17 sectors of the galaxy. Do you know why?" "Too aggressive," she guessed. "Too friendly. You make friends with things that should eat you. You negotiate with predators. You form emotional bonds with creatures specifically designed by evolution to kill you. It is disturbing." She smiled, that peculiar human expression that combined warmth and danger in equal measure. "But it works. That is exactly what disturbs me." 3 cycles passed after the hyena incident, and I genuinely believed things might return to normal. Fool. Idiot. Naive academic with delusions of a peaceful research posting. I should have known better. The transmission arrived during my morning protein infusion. Council observer Kelrath, a Vorganian bureaucrat whose species specialized in finding fault with everything, materialized on my holo screen wearing an expression that suggested he had been gargling acid. "Coordinator Threx, I am reviewing your facility reports, specifically the incident involving a human juvenile, a Mellivora capensis, and 12 crocuta specimens." My stomach acids churned. Observer Kelrath, I submitted a comprehensive analysis explaining the remarkable peaceful resolution. Peaceful resolution? You allowed a 4-rotation human child to enter an unsecured predator habitat. His head tentacles quivered with indignation. "The council is questioning your competency. The child breached security protocols through no fault of my management," I protested, my voice rising. "Furthermore, the interaction provided invaluable data about human behavioral patterns and their unique ability to..." "Enough." Kelrath waved a dismissive appendage. "I am arriving personally to conduct a facility inspection. 2 cycles from now, everything will be operational, and more importantly, nothing will go wrong. Am I clear?" The transmission ended before I could respond. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. 2 cycles to prepare for an inspection by the galaxy's most pedantic species, while managing a facility that apparently operated as an unauthorized petting zoo for Earth's most dangerous organisms. Ven entered my office carrying 3 data tablets and an expression that suggested more bad news. Coordinator, we have a situation developing in Sector 12. Define situation. I was almost afraid to ask. Do you remember the university interns who arrived last week? The ones conducting comparative cognition studies on Earth mammals? The overly enthusiastic youngsters who kept asking inappropriate questions about human mating rituals? Yes, unfortunately. Well, one of them, a Zentari named Pip, decided to design an enrichment exercise for the facility animals. Specifically, an escape room scenario designed to test problem-solving capabilities. I felt my secondary heart begin palpitating. Please tell me this escape room scenario does not involve actual escaping. Ven's silence spoke volumes. Which animals? I demanded. 6 species, including Brutus. Of course, Brutus. Why would the universe spare me from that particular chaos agent? I stood abruptly, knocking over my protein infusion. What else? A juvenile chimpanzee named Rocket, 2 ravens designated Thought and Memory, an octopus called Houdini, a border collie named Professor, and a rat who apparently answers to Chairman Squeakers. I stared at him. Those names. Those are actual official specimen designations? The human researchers insist on naming everything. They claim it improves emotional investment in the subject's welfare. It improves emotional investment, I repeated flatly. What it actually does is make it harder to maintain professional distance when those subjects inevitably cause disasters. We rushed toward Sector 12, where Pip had constructed his enrichment challenge inside one of our larger observation chambers. The young Zentari stood outside the sealed entrance, his faceplates flushed with pride. Coordinator Threx. Perfect timing. I have created the ultimate cognitive assessment tool. The subjects must work together to solve a series of puzzles that will unlock the exit. It tests cooperation, tool use, pattern recognition, and abstract reasoning. And what happens if they fail? I asked, already dreading the answer. The room locks down for 12 hours, and they must try again. 12 hours? You designed a scenario that could trap 6 highly intelligent, easily bored Earth animals in a confined space for 12 hours. Pip's confidence wavered slightly. When you phrase it that way, it sounds concerning. That is because it is concerning. I pulled up the chamber feed on my portable display. Inside, the 6 animals were examining their surroundings with varying degrees of interest. Brutus was sniffing aggressively at the door seam. The ravens were investigating the ceiling panels. The chimpanzee was systematically testing every surface for weakness. Professor the border collie sat perfectly still, his intense gaze tracking everything. Chairman Squeakers was already chewing through a rubber seal. And Houdini, that tentacled escape artist, was doing something complicated with the ventilation grate. How long have they been in there? Ven asked. Pip checked his chronometer. Approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes. They have been in your carefully designed challenge for 4 minutes. I zoomed the camera closer to Houdini's activities. And the octopus has already removed 3 screws from the ventilation system, using a piece of metal it somehow acquired. That is impossible. I did not place any metal objects in the chamber. Well, Houdini apparently brought his own tools, because he is currently performing amateur engineering on your infrastructure. The ravens, Thought and Memory, had discovered the primary puzzle mechanism, a series of colored buttons that needed to be pressed in sequence. They began pecking experimentally, communicating with each other through a series of croaks and clicks that sounded disturbingly like conversation. Rocket the chimpanzee, meanwhile, had climbed onto Professor's back for a better vantage point. The border collie did not seem to mind being used as mobile scaffolding, simply adjusting his stance for better stability. They moved as a unit toward the second puzzle station. They are cooperating, Ven observed. Different species with completely different evolutionary backgrounds, working together toward a common goal. Yes, wonderful, fascinating, I muttered. Now let them out before they disassemble your precious observation chamber. But the challenge is designed to take at least 2 hours. We need to measure their problem-solving duration for proper data collection. Brutus had stopped sniffing the door and was now digging at the floor panel with methodical determination. Small chunks of reinforced composite material were piling up behind him. Is he tunneling? I asked incredulously. Is the honey badger tunneling through our industrial-grade flooring? Honey badgers are exceptional excavators, Ven said. consulting his datapad. Their claws can penetrate substances with hardness ratings up to... I do not care about hardness ratings. Stop him before he breaches the foundation. Too late. Brutus had already created a gap large enough to fit his head through. He disappeared into the hole with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting his entire life for this exact opportunity. On another camera angle, Houdini had successfully removed the ventilation grate and was squeezing his boneless body through the ductwork. The octopus moved with fluid grace, his tentacles finding purchase on surfaces that should have been impossible to grip. Two of them are escaping, I said, my voice climbing toward hysteria. Two of your test subjects are actively escaping through methods that completely bypass your puzzle system. The puzzle system was designed based on standard problem-solving metrics, Pip protested weakly. Standard problem-solving metrics do not account for brute force tunneling and cephalopod flexibility. The Ravens had figured out the button sequence. A panel slid open, revealing the second challenge, a series of levers that needed to be pulled in specific patterns. Thought and memory examined this new puzzle with clear interest, then made a decision that showcased impressive efficiency. They flew to where Chairman Squeakers was still chewing through seals and began vocalizing insistently. The rat paused his gnawing, looked at the Ravens, then scurried toward the lever mechanism. Within 30 seconds, Chairman Squeakers had climbed into the mechanism's housing and was systematically destroying the internal components. They are not solving the puzzle, I said. They are eliminating the puzzle as a concept. Rocket and Professor had reached the third challenge station, a maze that required navigating through a series of transparent barriers. The chimpanzee studied it for approximately 10 seconds, then picked up the border collie and threw him over the entire obstacle. Did that chimpanzee just throw a dog? Ven asked. The chimpanzee has apparently decided that going around obstacles is for species with less upper body strength. Professor landed gracefully on the other side, immediately pressing the completion button with his nose. Another panel opened. Rocket beat his chest triumphantly and climbed over the barrier using strength that made the transparent walls bow alarmingly. A grinding sound echoed through the chamber. Brutus emerged from his tunnel directly inside the final puzzle room, completely bypassing everything Pip had designed. The honey badger shook debris from his fur and surveyed his surroundings with evident satisfaction. 12%. I turned to Pip, struggling to maintain professional composure. 12% of your challenge remains functional. Everything else has been either bypassed, destroyed, or fundamentally broken by creatures who refuse to engage with your parameters. The ventilation system coughed, and Houdini dropped from a ceiling panel directly onto the exit mechanism. The octopus wrapped multiple tentacles around the locking components and began pulling with startling force. Metal groaned. Something inside the lock snapped with an audible crack. The exit door slid open. All 6 animals immediately rushed through, ignoring the elaborate puzzle pathway entirely. They poured into the corridor outside the observation chamber, like water escaping a broken dam. Brutus led the charge, followed by the Ravens flying overhead, Professor running with mechanical precision, Rocket knuckle walking at impressive speed, Chairman Squeakers riding on the chimpanzee's back, and Houdini slithering along the wall with his tentacles making wet slapping sounds against the composite paneling. Seal the corridor! I shouted. Which corridor? Ven's fingers flew across his control tablet. They are spreading into multiple passages. Alarms began wailing. Security protocols activated automatically. Emergency barriers sliding into place throughout Sector 12. Unfortunately, the barriers were designed to contain normal animals, not a coalition of Earth's most intelligent and motivated species. Brutus dug under the first barrier before it fully descended. The Ravens flew through the gap he created. Professor followed, with Rocket and Chairman Squeakers close behind. Houdini simply squeezed through the 3-centimeter space between the barrier and the floor. They are moving toward the central atrium, Ven reported, tracking their biosignatures. Coordinator, the atrium has access ports to 17 other sectors. I am aware of the atrium's connectivity. Why do you think I am currently experiencing a stress-induced molt? We ran toward the atrium, followed by Pip, who was frantically apologizing while simultaneously recording everything for his research thesis. The central atrium was a massive space, an architectural showpiece designed to impress visiting dignitaries with its soaring ceilings and elegant water features. It was not designed to contain 6 escaping animals, We arrived just in time to witness Rocket discovering the decorative fountain. The chimpanzee hooted with delight and immediately began splashing water everywhere. Professor barked encouragement. The ravens dive-bombed the fountain spray, catching droplets in their beaks. Chairman Squeakers constructed a tiny raft from floating leaves and began navigating the fountain basin like an admiral surveying his fleet. Brutus ignored the aquatic festivities and focused on a more pressing concern. He had spotted the facility cafeteria through a transparent wall. The honey badger pressed his face against the clear barrier, his gaze locked on the food storage units with laser intensity. He cannot possibly get through that wall, Pip said hopefully. It is reinforced plasteel, rated for impacts up to. Brutus began digging at the wall's foundation. Why does he keep digging? Does he not understand that digging through walls is not how doors work? Brutus does not care how doors work, I said wearily. Brutus has decided that the wall is temporary and reality will adjust accordingly. Houdini had discovered the ventilation control panel and was systematically pressing buttons with his tentacles. The Atrium's environmental systems began cycling through random configurations, temperature fluctuating, humidity increasing, air pressure shifting. Lights flickered between spectrum settings, bathing everything in strange colors. "Stop the octopus!" I yelled. "How?" Ven shouted back. "He has no skeleton." "You cannot restrain something with no skeleton." Security personnel arrived, a team of 6 Zentari guards carrying containment nets and tranquilizer equipment. They approached the fountain carefully, training focused on Rocket as the largest and presumably most dangerous target. The ravens spotted them immediately. Thought and memory erupted from the fountain in an explosion of water droplets, screaming warnings that sounded disturbingly like laughter. They swooped at the guards, their wing beats creating enough wind to scatter equipment. Professor barked sharply, and suddenly all 6 animals were moving with coordinated purpose. Rocket grabbed Chairman Squeakers and scrambled up a support column. The ravens harassed the guards, diving and retreating with tactical precision. Brutus abandoned his excavation project and charged toward the security team. Because of course he did. Houdini jetted water from the fountain's plumbing system he had somehow accessed, creating a slippery obstacle course. Professor, that border collie with his unsettling intelligence, simply sat in the center of the chaos and watched everything with calculating eyes. One guard attempted to net Rocket but caught only air as the chimpanzee swung to another column. A second guard slipped on Houdini's water trap and sprawled gracelessly across the atrium floor. Brutus seized the opportunity to steal the guard's lunch container from his utility belt, cracking it open with practiced efficiency. "This is a disaster," I moaned. "Observer Kelrath arrives tomorrow. Tomorrow. And I have 6 animals conducting guerrilla warfare in my atrium." "Coordinator." Ven grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with alarm. "Where's the human child?" My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Jack. Dr. Larsson's offspring. He has education sessions in Sector 4 every morning. Sector 4 connects to the atrium through Corridor 17. We both turned slowly toward Corridor 17's entrance. There, standing in the doorway with a backpack covered in cartoon dinosaurs, was Jack. The human child surveyed the chaos with bright, curious eyes. "Animals playing," he announced delightedly. Every creature in the blessed atrium stopped. Rocket froze mid-swing. The ravens halted their aerial maneuvers. Chairman Squeakers stood up on his hind legs. Houdini's tentacles went still. Professor's tail began wagging. Brutus dropped the stolen lunch container and trotted directly toward the child, chittering a greeting that translated roughly to, "My favorite tiny human has arrived." "No, no, no, no," I whispered, watching helplessly as the animals converged on Jack. "Someone stop this." But nobody could stop this. Nobody should have stopped this. Because what happened next would be replayed in xenobiology classes across the galaxy for generations. Jack opened his backpack and pulled out snacks. Of course he had snacks. The human child had apparently adopted a personal policy of maintaining constant snack availability for all potential friends, regardless of species or danger level. "I have crackers," he announced. "And cheese, and juice boxes." Rocket reached him first, kneeling down to accept crackers with gentle fingers. The chimpanzee made soft hooting sounds, and Jack giggled. "Funny monkey." The ravens landed on Jack's shoulders, one on each side, and he offered them cheese cubes. Thought and memory took their portions delicately, making appreciative croaking sounds. Chairman Squeakers climbed up Jack's leg and into his lap, where the child provided him with a cracker piece sized appropriately for rodent consumption. Professor approached last, sitting politely and waiting for permission. Jack placed cheese cubes in a small pile in front of the border collie. Good boy. Smart dog. Houdini slithered over, and Jack held out a juice box. The octopus wrapped a tentacle around it, somehow managing to operate the small straw, despite having no evolutionary experience with such objects. Brutus, naturally, received the largest portion, an entire package of crackers that he accepted with dignified pleasure. The honey badger settled beside Jack, munching contentedly while maintaining vigilant watch over his tiny human friend. The security team stood frozen, their nets hanging forgotten. Pip's mouth moved silently, forming words that would not come. Ven had begun recording everything with shaking hands. I walked slowly toward the group, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. 6 of Earth's most intelligent animals sat peacefully around a 4-rotation human child, sharing snacks and exhibiting absolutely zero signs of the chaos they had created moments earlier. Jack, I said carefully, where is your educator supervisor? Bathroom. The child replied cheerfully, offering me a cracker. You want cracker, Mr. Threx? I do not possess the appropriate digestive enzymes for Earth food. I looked at the animals, who were watching me with expressions ranging from indifferent to mildly threatening. Jack, these animals were causing significant disruption. They were running through the facility unsupervised. They were playing, Jack said, as if this explained everything. As if playing was a valid excuse for security breaches and structural damage. Playing, I repeated. They destroyed an observation chamber, evaded containment protocols, and assaulted security personnel with coordinated tactics. That is not playing. That is insurrection. Brutus made a low warning growl. Rocket showed teeth. The raven's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. Professor tilted his head in a way that suggested I was being unreasonable. Okay. They were very enthusiastic playing. I amended quickly, not wanting to test whether the honey badger would defend the child's interpretation of events. Dr. Larsson arrived at a run, her hair disheveled and her uniform stained with soil samples. Jack, you were supposed to stay with Educator Rin. Educator Rin went bathroom, Mama. I wanted to see the animals. So, you just wandered into restricted areas again? Jack shrugged. That universal human gesture conveying seemed reasonable at the time. He was still distributing snacks, completely unconcerned with a minor detail that he had essentially ended an escape crisis through strategic application of processed foods. Dr. Larsson, I said, struggling to maintain professional detachment, your offspring has once again demonstrated the human capacity for alliance building with unpredictable results. Observer Kelrath arrives tomorrow to assess facility operations. I need your absolute guarantee that Jack will remain in designated civilian areas. I can guarantee he will be supervised, she said carefully. I cannot guarantee where he might end up. Jack has a talent for appearing in unlikely locations. That is not reassuring. No, she agreed. But it is honest. The animals, satisfied with their snacks and seemingly content with the current arrangement, began returning to their respective habitats voluntarily. Rocket carried Chairman Squeakers. The ravens flew alongside Houdini, who was still clutching his juice box. Professor walked beside Brutus, the two apparently having formed some kind of mutual respect pact. They moved through the facility like they owned it, and perhaps, in some fundamental way, they did. Earth organisms had mastered the art of making any environment their territory through sheer stubborn refusal to acknowledge limitations. Observer Kelrath's inspection the next day went surprisingly well. Mostly because I hid Jack in Dr. Larsson's quarters, and sealed Brutus in his habitat with enough enrichment treats to occupy a small army. The Vorganian official found minimal faults, praised our documentation practices, and left after only 6 hours of tedious protocol review. As his transport departed, I allowed myself a moment of relief. Then I noticed Jack standing near the predator enclosure viewing window, Brutus pressed against the glass from inside, and 12 hyenas gathered behind the honey badger like an honor guard. They are friends now, Jack explained when I approached. Badger told the dogs I am okay. The badger told the hyenas you are okay, I repeated slowly. Yep. I looked at Brutus, who stared back with those dark, intense eyes. I looked at the hyenas, who had somehow been integrated into the honey badger's social hierarchy through cookie diplomacy and one human child's absolute conviction that everything would be fine. I finally understood. Humans did not conquer Earth through superior strength or intelligence. They conquered it through an unshakable belief that the universe would bend to accommodate their friendships. They made alliances with wolves and turned them into dogs. They befriended cats who chose to stay. They partnered with horses, elephants, dolphins, and apparently, honey badgers. And the truly terrifying part? It worked. It kept working. It would probably continue working until humans had charmed every species in the galaxy into their impossible coalition. You know what, Jack? I said, sitting down beside the human child. I think your badger is probably right. Jack beamed at me. That pure human expression of joy that somehow made the entire chaotic disaster worthwhile. Inside the enclosure, Brutus pressed one paw against the glass, and I could swear the honey badger was smiling.